Okay, let's take a look at the next slide now. Um, Again, this slide focuses on the 7-year period that's coming. That's the judgment that's going to take place on earth. The title of the slide is Daniel's 70th week. We don't need to get hung up on that right at the moment, but it refers to a period of 7 years of harsh judgment coming on the earth prior to the second coming of Christ. And so what this slide is going to take a look at is really an overview of the book of Revelation, beginning with where we left off in the last slide is the church being in heaven. And that picture of the church being in heaven is in Revelation 4 and 5. And so the church presumably is going to miss out on the judgments coming upon earth. That viewpoint is challenged by a lot of people. I think that the church needs to go through the judgments. The church needs to get purified by the judgments or whatever. I just don't think that's is biblically well defended. And again, when we get down to specific passages, we can take a look at that better. It also kind of violates a key principle of the way prophecy and most of the Bible is actually written, which is in a progressive kind of a manner. So in terms of history, you take a look at what's called a historical narrative. It's just the sequence of events, somebody retelling a story. Generally, all that prophecy is that same kind of historical walkthrough of the events sequenced one after another, except they just all haven't happened yet. And so that's one overarching reason why a lot of people take a look at the events that are yet to come and make the presumption that they're sequenced in kind of a linear fashion because that's the way they happened in the past. That's the way prophecy was fulfilled in the past. So the presumption is, since there is a lot of consistency in the Bible, that's the way it's going to happen in the future. So we have this linear progression as it was set out. These last 7 years before the return of Christ really denotes just an increasingly intense set of judgments coming upon the earth. And many people feel that by the time all the judgments are done, there could be definitely less than 50%, and some people think maybe 90% of the people on earth get killed during these series of judgments. And so it's very serious, and as you go back and we study these passages up here, you'll definitely have the sense that the judgments are severe. So let's come down and take a look at the bottom part of this slide first. Under earth, we're not going to go through this very much, but this is just a set of passages that show pictures of this end time frame, and they do these broad sweeps of telling us about certain aspects that are going to be happening during the time of the end. And so these are interesting passages just to read because the Bible is written in a very progressive fashion where not any one concept is just laid out in one passage. It's added to, and it's additive. Prophet after prophet would give some little snapshot or part of the picture. And so if you want to assemble the whole picture, you actually have to assemble all the related passages, and they're additive, or you accumulate them to draw the whole picture. And so that's what these passages down here help us do, is help paint the overall picture. The first set of judgments that occur are called the sealed judgments, and I'm going to stop on this just for a second because these sealed judgments are so named because what's happening is Jesus is pictured opening these wax seals on a document, and based on the description of the document from the Bible, it matches what in biblical days was the picture of a title deed. And so what we have here is we see Jesus basically claiming title to the earth. And in the overall story of the Bible, the very first chapter in Genesis talked about how Satan usurped or claimed ownership of earth and stole it away from man. So what we have here in Genesis is now Jesus having paid the price for our sin. And the reason why Satan was able to steal the title deed temporarily for earth, we have Jesus reclaiming that. And he starts by taking this title and beginning to pop the seals on it. And the very first seal that's popped is the Antichrist is allowed to run free on earth. And that sets off this series of judgments. And in part, God is using this real satanic spirit and letting him run free on earth as part of the overall plan of judgment. And the very first thing that the Antichrist does is he tries to position himself as a peacemaker. And anti doesn't just mean against. Anti can also mean in the place of. And so this Antichrist figure is actually going to appear to be a Messiah that's coming. And I'm sure he's going to have a story for why the church left Earth and went somewhere else. And then he's also going to focus on doing what historically has been nearly impossible, which is setting up a peace treaty with the Jewish people. So that covenant that's talked about in the Bible is a peace treaty with the Jewish people and really with the rest of the world. It might be a UN treaty or it might be a peace treaty between the neighbors, but if you look in the news today, anti-Semitism is on the growth path, and this peace treaty presumably puts the Jewish people at ease and says, hey, the rest of the world, you're agreeing not to attack, which really sets up the rest of the series of judgments that are going to hit the earth. It's going to make the Jewish people think that this Antichrist figure may actually be the Messiah because he was able to accomplish this peace treaty that hasn't occurred back since the days of the reforming of Israel in 1948. So they're going to put their trust in him as potentially the Messiah, and the rest of the earth is going to lay hands off for the time being. Part of what probably is in this covenant, this peace covenant, is the rebuilding of the Jewish temple. And we talked about in the prior slide that in 70 AD, the Jewish temple was destroyed by the Roman legions. One of the big mile markers that people that study the Bible prophecy are looking at today is the fact that the temple supplies all the implements. Many of them are gold and done in very fancy artistic ways. They've all been rebuilt in preparation for building this third temple. And if you look on the internet at the Temple Mount Faithful, if you take a look at every year the Jewish people try and place the cornerstone back on the Temple Mount. They're anxiously waiting to try to build the third temple, and many people speculate that part of this peace treaty is enabling building what's called the third Jewish temple. And the reason why that's part of the program and is early on in that 7-year period, if not at the beginning, is that some of the passages in the Bible talk about this Antichrist figure, again, being in the place of Christ. He's going to represent himself as the Messiah, both to the Jewish people and to the rest of the world. And he does that right at the midpoint of the 7-year period by going into the temple and declaring himself as God. And so it's a major milestone to see that the preparations are all done for building the third temple, and it's just waiting on some peace treaty, some reconciliation between the Palestinians, for instance, and the Jewish people to allow that temple to be built. We also have down toward the bottom here a bunch of passages that relate to what happens at the midpoint of the 7-year period. We've got, after the Antichrist declares himself to be God, the Jewish people, according to the Bible, realize that they made a big mistake and that they put their trust in the wrong person. And so a bunch of the Jewish faithful flee to the mountains. And that initiates a whole series of judgments where the Antichrist brings armies against the rest of the Jewish people in Israel. And he's trying to kill them. And the reason for trying to kill them is he knows that the second coming of Christ can't occur if there's no Jewish faithful people left on earth to call for him. And that's a criteria in the Bible. And so you see the Antichrist with his armies pouring out as much hate and as much killing and desolation as he can, trying to prevent anybody from being left to be able to call in prayer for the return of Jesus. The last parts that we have down here is the city of Babylon falls. Really, the Bible, some theologians talk about it as a tale of two cities. For the believers in Jesus and the Father in the Bible called Jehovah, they're focused on the city of Jerusalem, where the temples have been, where worship has been, and in terms of Satan and the Antichrist and sort of the evil part of the Bible, it really focuses around Babylon. And part of the debate is Babylon represent a specific city, like Jerusalem is a city in the Bible for the Jews and for God's people, or is it more of a theoretical notion of it's some city, but it could be New York or Washington or Paris or even Vatican City in Rome, in Italy. I mean, is it an actual city or is it a city that's being called Babylon? Well, you know, many Bible scholars that take the Bible to mean what it says that it's going to be a literal city. So again, looking for Babylon being rebuilt is just one of the other signs that people say, hey, we're moving into the end days. I think it goes without much more description. The last battle, everybody's very familiar with, even if you don't read the Bible, the Battle of Armageddon, which is the very last decimating big battle. There's never been one like it on Earth, and it's really not a battle as much as all the armies of Earth have gathered themselves in the plains of Megiddo in Israel, which you can go see on Google Earth. And as they're gathered there to fight, what they are going to fight is the coming of Christ. And so the Antichrist knows, and he's gathered all these armies behind him, that if Jesus returns, his day is over. And so as he knows he's coming close to that day, he gathers all these armies with the very weak notion that he's going to somehow kill off Christ as he returns. And that just doesn't happen, and Christ returns, and with literally just words from his mouth, all these gathered armies get wiped clean in the valley of Megiddo and in the plains leading up to southern Israel. So there's the major event, and that kind of rounds out the end of this last 7-year period of difficulty on earth.